Hi there, and welcome back to another episode at Station Road. Now, in today's episode, we're continuing on with the main station building, the Platform 1 building, and we begin to apply the printed brick texture to the pre-assembled structures and also some of the unassembled components as well. So if you recall from the previous episode, we got as far as assembling the outer MDF structure for the main station building. So that was the two end structures plus also the individual wall components for the central section. So as I mentioned in today's episode, we can now actually begin to apply this printed brick texture. So I think without further ado, let's just jump into what I got up to. So we'll start with the end structures, and I had actually gone ahead and applied the brickwork to one of the end structures. So looking from the platform, this is the left hand end and this one here is the right. So it went reasonably okay, but there were a few steps in the application of this that I'd simply forgotten to do, so it became a little bit more of a mission than I would have liked to have actually been. So we'll go through the process with this one, which is pretty much identical, except of course this time I'll actually include the steps in the right order, so it does make the application a little bit easier. So the process or method that I'm going to be using for applying this printed brick texture involves basically kind of two print zones, as I am going to call them, and one is this side here. So this is partially internal, this wall, with of course some exterior bits at both ends, and that is this section here. And then we've got this large section through here of the print, and of course this is to be applied in one piece, and that of course wraps around the external wall, so around here and all the way around here. So it's of course going to wrap these corners. So this component is a little bit more of a challenge to apply, but the theory is by doing this, what we're going to end up with is a very tidy seam running down these sort of inside walls on this side, which are going to correspond with the stonework. So the corner stonework actually becomes the seams in the print. Now, there's two reasons for doing that. Probably the most predominant reason is I don't have an A3 color printer, so this is an A4 sticky label paper, and basically I'm restricted by how large a print I can actually print out. So I can get 3 walls in, and then of course this is the final wall, which is this one here. But then in saying that, even if I did have an A3 printer, I probably may still go down this route, because inevitably there's always going to be a seam in one corner at least, even if you print out all the walls all together in one single strip. These two other sections here that are in the same print are actually for these walls here, which of course is the middle section of the main station building, but we'll get onto that shortly. So I'll go ahead and just trim all of this stuff out and get it ready, and then come back when we're ready to go. So we're going to start with this internal wall. So it's predominantly internal, with of course the two external bits at each end here, which is this print here. And what's going to happen is we'll apply this print to here, and then of course this larger print that wraps around the other 3 sides. Here you can see I've trimmed the stonework to actually align with the offset stonework there, which then when it overlaps around onto this face here, it essentially will camouflage the seam. So we'll just peel off this section, and as I have done previously with this label paper, is I don't peel all the backing off if I can help it. In some scenarios you do have to take it all off, but in this situation we can leave the majority of it on, and this just helps us move the print into place. So this print is exactly the right size, so it just simply is butt joined to all the edges. So it's a case of lining it up. In each corner. And lining it up at the other end. And then we can lift it off and peel the remainder of this backing off. And as you can see, I've left some excess on here just simply to grab onto, and we'll trim that off once we've got this stuck down. It's also careful not to push too hard in these cavities here. There's a door here, you've got an internal door, and then of course the ticket window as well. So this is a case of pressing it down around the edges. And the other aspect that needs to be considered as well, of course, is not applying so much pressure that this whole structure collapses. We certainly don't want that either. So these prints, of course, have the usual method of a matte spray varnish applied over them. That just gives the print some durability, particularly when applying the print, that you're not going to scratch it or rub it off in any way. So we can now trim that excess off this edge. And that's our first side done. And then once we've done that, we're going to cut these cavities and wrap the texture in through the window and door apertures. And there's also a tab at the bottom here which I need to cut the print away from. So I'm just going to run a knife along this edge. So that notch there, of course, is where the central section of the station, the floor, slots into that. It's basically a locating slot, really. It's not needed for any structural integrity. It's just simply to get the location of the floor in the right place. So what you can do is trim away around the base of this door, because we don't need that bit of print. So making this cut first, because if you start cutting other sections and then get to this, it all starts to collapse on itself. So we're just removing that piece out of there. And the same for this door down here. So just going to run a knife down the center of here, and then we've got a cut through here and through here, and I'd make an additional cut just around the corner a little bit, because the top of these window frames have that unusual sort of scalloped shape at the top, and so wrapping that part it's not quite as easy as just a basic rectangular window. So I'm just pushing in the main uprights first, and I often find that the handle of some tweezers is quite good for getting a nice crisp edge on it. So we're just going to press that in, and then that gets folded back on itself on the inside. And then we can start to press in this top section here, and I actually find the other end of the tweezers, which has a little bit of curvature on it, is quite good for working this in. Right, so that's got that worked in. So as you can see, that's how the wrap has worked, and you may be able to see that on the inside, how it's been folded around, and it gives a really, relatively convincing edge, of course, to the fact that the stonework is solid and not just a two-dimensional print. So I'll carry on, I'll do this door and the ticket window as well, and come back when we're ready to apply the brickwork to the other three walls. Right, so we're now ready to apply the remaining three walls, and of course this is going on in one piece. So I've completed this wall here, and of course wrapped the door and ticket window cavity, and I've also cleared the slots here where the wall join comes in through here, so that's been cleared as well. So around the front here there's some tiny little wee notches in here. Now they've been designed and are ready to accept the girders that are going to come out and actually support the canopy. So when we're wrapping this, I've also got to clear those slots as well. Now interestingly, I didn't actually include these slots in last week's video, so the mock-up that I did last week, and I'm calling it mock-up now because this is it here, and of course on this end there's no slots there, and it wasn't until after I assembled this and I realized I need to consider this. So it's quite interesting. I'm very much an advocate for thinking at least several steps ahead, and in that scenario I didn't. So it's interesting as I progress through building this model. So as I mentioned, this is a little bit more of a challenge, and I've trimmed this in such a way, so for example there was some lines on the print, so I've cut to those lines. Essentially what that's going to do is make sure I've got this up the right way. It's going to help me line up the building, this wall, in terms of where this goes. So the outer wall here has to line up exactly there, because the plan is to apply that wall and then wrap the two ends. So I'm not starting at one corner and going all the way around. I'm starting actually in the middle and working out either side. So I'm thinking that's the easiest way to go, because otherwise if you start at one end, by the time you get right around to the other end you could well be misaligning the print. So yeah, it's certainly a little bit of a challenge in that sense. So the print has got to line up that way on this edge here, and I'm going to turn it around this way because I really do need to see where the alignment is. Unfortunately, that's not going to get captured on the camera. So another process too that I need to consider is I'm going to peel off this backing entirely, but then what I'm actually going to do is reapply some of the backing to the print so that I don't end up with too much exposed sticky label paper. So we're just going to carefully peel it all off, but what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to trim off these bits here and actually put them back on, because I think it's just going to be a bit of a safeguard when it comes to handling this, that we don't end up with it getting stuck to itself or stuck to something that you didn't want it to be stuck to. So hence why that. So we've now actually only got this part here exposed, and what do we want to do? We want to turn it around that way, and I'm just lining it up to these corners and sort of leaning it into the corner so it's not all sitting down there, and then just lightly press it down, and then we're going to turn it over and start applying a bit of pressure. Now I found that that seems to be the easiest way to go, is to have the print face down on a flat surface and actually bring the model or the structural component down on top of it rather than the other way around. If I was trying to apply this the other way around, it becomes a lot more tricky and complicated. So we can now apply a bit of pressure to this. And just checking, yes, I have got it the right way up. I remember once I applied some brickwork and the whole thing was upside down. Right, so we've now applied that, and we've just got these two ends yet to do. So we've now got to work our way around and bring this print around to here, and what's actually going to happen, if I bring it in a bit closer, is those cornerstones, offset cornerstones, are going to line up with these cornerstones around here. So that's the theory, and then the cornerstone edge becomes the seam, and it actually works quite well. It becomes quite well disguised. Now if you wanted to, you could actually run a bit of a marker pen or something along that edge, and that would eliminate the white edge as well completely. But the interesting thing is, with this particular model, that the white edge is actually going to be facing inward. So if you can imagine, there's two walls here. You're never ever going to be able to see that angle. So I'm not going to worry about doing it in this scenario. But if this was a straight wall, there was nothing here, there was no building coming out from this component here, then yes, these edges here, I would just run a marker pen along the edge just to eliminate the white edge of the sticky label paper. So we're going to start with this one here and take off the backing. And this is one of the reasons why you can see I've made a bit of an unusual cut here. So that's the true base of the brickwork. So what we're going to do is we're just going to pull this over and sort of kind of stretch it, and the same time looking at that base to see where it lines up. and then we can just lift that up. Now this label paper is permanent label paper, but if you don't press too hard initially, you can actually lift it up before it sticks. Once you've actually pressed it down with some weight, it then basically you can't really get it up, not without it tearing, because it is a paper based label paper. It's not synthetic in any way. So we're just going to apply that. Now I'm having to do it like this because I don't really want to put this down on the table, because we've got another end here. So it's a little bit tricky in the sense that you have to sort of hold it up in the air, although I can actually put it this way, press it in. But the main thing, as I've said, is not to apply so much pressure that you end up damaging the base structure. So we're just going to So as you can see, I've got loads of brick bleed on here that is just printed that way. There was no point. It's not necessary to shape the brickwork to this triangular shape, the roof shape. So we can now actually start to work the stonework around the corner and start to press that in. And then if we look at that corner, you'd be pushed to find the seam. Now even if I turn it that way, where you'll see the edge of the paper or the label paper, even then it's difficult to see. So it works quite well. It's certainly, there's lots of different ways you can hide a join with a print. Often a good method is to have a join where a downpipe is going to be for guttering, because then you place the downpipe over the top of that. Other things could be external ducting or cables and things like that too, that can eventually be used to hide a seam. So it's now a case of doing the other side and pulling it tight and just checking that the stonework here is going to line up. So one of the things you've noticed too here, as opposed to the platform 2 building, is what I've actually done. And if you take a look at this dummy run version here, it's had a blast of spray paint over it, and that's simply to remove the dark edges of the MDF that go through the laser cutter. And I've just spray painted it in roughly a similar tone to what the stonework is. So all the stonework, or at least all the window apertures, are stone. So when those windows get wrapped, any potential exposed areas of the substrate, the MDF, will just show the colour of the spray paint, which sort of blends in to the stonework. Previously I had just brushed that on with an acrylic paint with the platform 2 building. So once again, we're just working our way around this corner with the stonework. And that's got the other corner in. So we can now trim off our excess. And the excess off. These pieces here. And last but not least, this one might be a bit tricky to Right, so that's all four sides now covered in the print, and much the same as how I did this door here and demonstrated how that was split and then wrapped, and then the tabs wrapped right around to the other side. The same process I'll be using to do these windows. So I'll do these off camera because it does take a little bit of time, particularly these ones because they're a bit smaller and more intricate, but it essentially is the same process. Right, so that's now got all the window cavities now wrapped. So we now have our two complete end structures. So we'll set these aside and we'll take a look at the central component, which is not pre-assembled. So in this situation we're going to apply the brick textual print to these components before it's all assembled into one structure. So I've made these identical, and as far as I can tell from the drawings or plans and also from photography, the front and the rear, this middle section appears to be the same. I could be wrong, there may be some minor differences, but I thought for the purposes of this model, I think it'd just be easier to replicate both sides. So I'll set this up so the print fits exactly to the edges, less the tabs here, so I didn't really want to add thickness to those tabs in case it ended up not being able to fit. So I think we'll just trim off one end. Actually, I think I'll trim off both ends and just leave a bit at the top so I can handle it. And same process here. We're going to peel back just a proportion of our backing sheet, fold that back on itself, and then position this so we want that bottom corner to be butt joined up there, and the other corner to be I think I might just move it in just a bit. That's our middle section here, and we'll just actually pop this in position and see how it's going to look. So the idea is that this slots into here, and that should butt up, and we'll have the stonework lining up, and then we'll just slot this one in at that end. And then of course this one here actually belongs on this side, because this is the one that's got the canopy slots in it, but the other one will, well, let's just shove it in here for the moment. So this is what we'll end up with. So I'll carry on and of course wrap the cavities, the door and the window cavities, and also apply the print to this one as well, and then obviously swap them around, and I'll come back when that's all done. Right, so I've now completed the two middle section walls with the brick texture wrap, and this gives a little bit of a closer look at what happens on the inside, and it looks rather messy, but it all gets hidden in the end. So one of the things to be aware of when it comes to wrapping around windows and door frames and things like that is, depending on how wide the door or the window is, sometimes you have to, once you've wrapped it around this part here, then sometimes you have to trim the tab back a bit before you fold it back, otherwise it actually begins to overlap into other areas. So that's the only thing to be aware of. So we can momentarily pop this together. So we'll get these around the right way too this time, and this one this side, and pop that into there, and that into there. Just give it a bit of a wriggle, and that's how it's starting to shape up. So we can actually start to see the platform 1 building, or the main station building, take shape, and it's looking a little bit like Laura and Gil's house, isn't it? So there we have it. That is now the outer printed brick texture applied to the main structures, and it is certainly starting to take shape. You can actually begin to now see what the main station building is going to end up looking like. So in the next episode we'll begin to get into the interior structure, so the sandwiched wall that's in the middle, then the interior wall, which of course then includes the interior print textures as well. So part of this was already done because we've got a shared wall in here, or 2 shared walls, but otherwise the rest is still yet to be done. So I'll leave it there for today's episode. I certainly hope you've gained some inspiration and ideas for your own layout, and maybe you might even consider doing a little bit of printed brick texture wrapping. So I'll sign off for now. Do take care, look after yourselves. Of course, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will catch you next time. Bye for now.